My girlfriend's overbearing friend is ruining our relationship. Am I overreacting? I, 28M, have been dating my girlfriend Emily, 27F, for almost 2 years now, and honestly, things have been great. At least they were until her best friend Sarah, 26F, became a bigger part of our lives. I don't know if it's just me, but ever since Sarah moved back to town, it feels like my relationship with Emily has been slowly unraveling. To give you some context, Sarah and Emily have been friends since high school. They're practically inseparable, but Sarah moved away for college and stayed out of town for a few years after graduating. During that time, Emily and I met, started dating, and built what I thought was a strong and healthy relationship. We had great communication, solid trust, and honestly, I'd been thinking about proposing to her in the next year or so. But that all started to change when Sarah moved back about 6 months ago. Emily was ecstatic, and I was happy for her because I knew how close they were. What I didn't expect was for Sarah to become so involved in our day-to-day lives that it feels like I'm in a relationship with both of them, and not in a fun, consensual, or romantic way. At first, it was small things. Emily and Sarah would make plans for girls' nights more frequently, which didn't bother me. I get that she missed her friend and wanted to catch up, but soon, Sarah was coming over almost every day. She'd crash on our couch after long girl talk sessions and started suggesting how we should decorate the apartment, what kind of restaurants we should go to, and even commented on my choice of clothes. Always with a playful tone, but I could sense there was more to it. Then it escalated. One night, Emily and I were planning a weekend getaway, something we had been talking about for weeks. We both worked stressful jobs, and it was a way for us to unwind and reconnect. The night before we were supposed to leave, Sarah shows up unannounced, a bottle of wine in hand, and says, "Guess who's free for the weekend?" I looked at Emily, expecting her to explain that we already had plans, but instead, Emily invited her to come with us. I was floored. Wasn't this supposed to be our time together? I pulled Emily aside later that night and expressed how I felt, that I loved Sarah as her friend, but this was our trip, and I was hoping to spend some quality alone time with her. Emily looked hurt but agreed, telling Sarah that it would be just the two of us. Sarah laughed it off and said, "No worries, you guys need your couple time." But the mood was already kind of ruined. The trip was great at first, but halfway through, Emily kept checking her phone and texting. When I asked her what was going on, she hesitated but eventually admitted that Sarah was feeling lonely and left out since we had gone without her. Apparently, Sarah had been texting her constantly, making her feel guilty for leaving her behind. It led to a pretty big argument between Emily and me, with her saying that Sarah didn't mean any harm and that I was overreacting. I started to wonder if maybe I was overreacting. Emily and I had been fine before Sarah came back into the picture, and I didn't want to come across as the possessive boyfriend who was trying to keep her away from her best friend. So I tried to be more understanding and tolerant of Sarah's involvement in our lives. But things didn't get better. In fact, they got worse. Sarah began showing up at our place more frequently, often when I wasn't home. She'd bring over snacks and drinks, and the two of them would stay up late watching TV or talking in the kitchen. When I'd come home after a long day at work, it felt like I was interrupting something, like I was the third wheel in my own relationship. Sarah's stuff, a jacket here, a bag there, started piling up in our apartment, and it started to feel like she had a permanent presence in our space. One night, after another long day at work, I came home to find Sarah on my side of the bed, lounging with Emily. They were watching a movie together, and when I walked in, Sarah didn't even flinch. She just looked at me and said, "Oh hey, we're watching this show. You should join us." I felt like I was losing my mind. I wanted to say something, but Emily was smiling and seemed so happy to have Sarah there. I bit my tongue, grabbed a beer, and sat in the living room, waiting for them to finish. Later that night, when Sarah finally left, I confronted Emily. I asked her, point blank, if she understood how uncomfortable this was making me. I told her I felt like Sarah was becoming too involved in our relationship, and it was starting to feel like she didn't respect our boundaries as a couple. Emily looked torn. She apologized but also defended Sarah, saying that she didn't mean any harm and was just going through a rough time after a breakup. Emily's constant defense of Sarah was starting to feel like a barrier between us. Anytime I tried to bring up my concerns, Emily would shut down or get defensive, saying that Sarah needs her right now and that I just don't understand. It was like she was choosing Sarah over me. Then came the breaking point. Emily and I had planned a romantic dinner to celebrate our 2-year anniversary. I made a reservation at a fancy restaurant, bought her flowers, and was really looking forward to having a special night with just the two of us. But when I got home from work, Sarah was already at our apartment, dressed up and ready to go out with us. I couldn't believe it. Why is she here? I asked Emily, trying to keep my voice calm. Emily looked surprised and said, "Oh, I thought it would be fun if Sarah joined us. It'll be like a triple date. Sarah's bringing her new boyfriend." That was it for me. I couldn't hold back any longer. I told Emily how I felt, that this was supposed to be our night, and I was tired of constantly feeling like Sarah was a third person in our relationship. I told her that if she couldn't respect our boundaries as a couple, then I didn't know if I could continue the relationship. Emily looked shocked, like she hadn't realized how much it was affecting me. Sarah, who had been listening the whole time, just stood there awkwardly, looking between the two of us. I could tell she felt bad, but I also wondered if she really understood what she was doing. After that, Emily and I had a long talk. She apologized profusely, but I could tell she was torn between her loyalty to Sarah and her commitment to our relationship. I tried to explain that I wasn't asking her to cut Sarah out of her life, but that we needed boundaries, healthy boundaries, that allowed us to maintain our relationship without constant interference. For the next few weeks, things were tense, but improving. Emily made more of an effort to spend one-on-one time with me, and Sarah wasn't around as much. But I could feel the tension building, like something was going to give. That's when the real bombshell dropped. One night, after a particularly rough week at work, Emily sat me down and told me she needed to talk. She looked nervous, and my heart sank. I had no idea what she was about to say. She told me that Sarah had confessed to her that she had feelings for her. I was stunned. For a few seconds, I didn't know how to respond. My mind raced, trying to process what Emily had just told me. Sarah, her best friend, had feelings for her? Was this the reason for everything? The constant presence, the weird boundaries, the possessiveness over Emily? Well, what did you say to her? I finally asked, my voice shaking a little. Emily sighed and looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously in her lap. I told her I don't feel the same way. I love her as a friend, but nothing more than that. I didn't know what to do. She was crying, and I didn't want to hurt her, but I made it clear that I'm with you, and that's not going to change. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. When did this happen? Emily hesitated for a moment before answering. A few days ago, after our anniversary. That hit me hard. She had been keeping this from me. I tried to keep my cool, but my mind was swirling. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. And you didn't think to tell me until now? I didn't want to make things worse, Emily said, her voice small. I wasn't sure how to handle it. I thought maybe if I just gave Sarah some space, it would blow over, and everything would go back to normal. Normal? How could anything go back to normal after this? I stood up and started pacing the room, trying to make sense of it all. Emily, this explains everything. All the weird behavior, the constant interference, the way Sarah's been acting. It's because she's in love with you. How did I not see it? I stopped and looked at her. Did you really not notice? Emily looked away, guilt evident on her face. I don't know. I guess maybe on some level I suspected, but I didn't want to believe it. Sarah's my best friend, and I didn't want to ruin that. I thought it was just a phase, or that she was being clingy because she was lonely. I shook my head in disbelief. Emily, this isn't just some phase. She's in love with you, and you've let her come between us for months. How am I supposed to feel about this? How do we move forward? Emily's eyes filled with tears. I'm so sorry, she whispered. I never meant for this to happen. I love you, and I want to be with you. I just didn't know how to handle it. I sat down beside her, trying to calm myself. I wasn't angry at Emily, at least not in the way I thought I would be. I was angry at the situation, at how everything had spiraled out of control. But I could see that Emily was hurting too, and I didn't want to add to her pain. I need to know something, I said after a long pause. Has anything ever happened between you and Sarah? Emily's head shot up, her eyes wide. No, nothing like that. I swear, it's never been anything more than friendship. I wanted to believe her, and in that moment I did. Emily wasn't the type to lie or cheat. I knew that. But this revelation had shaken me, and it was going to take time for me to process everything. So what now? I asked, leaning back on the couch. What are you going to do about Sarah? You can't just ignore this. Emily wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. I know. I've been thinking about it a lot. I think I need to talk to her again. Set clear boundaries. I don't want to lose her as a friend, but I also can't let her feelings for me interfere with our relationship anymore. The idea of them having another talk made me nervous. I wasn't sure if Sarah would respect any boundaries after everything that had happened, but I didn't want to dictate Emily's friendships either. I knew this was something she had to handle on her own, but I also knew I needed to protect myself from being dragged into more drama. Okay, I said cautiously, but if things don't change, if Sarah keeps crossing the line, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Emily nodded, looking solemn. I understand. I don't want to lose you. I'll make sure she knows where things stand. We sat in silence for a while, both of us trying to figure out where to go from here. I wasn't sure if I could ever look at Sarah the same way again, and part of me worried that this was just the beginning of more problems. But I loved Emily, and I wasn't ready to throw everything away because of Sarah's feelings. Over the next few days, things were tense between us. Emily had promised to talk to Sarah, but I could tell she was dreading it. I didn't push her. I wanted her to handle it in her own way, but I also felt a growing sense of unease. Every time Sarah's name came up, my stomach twisted into knots. Finally, about a week later, Emily told me that she had talked to Sarah. They'd met up for coffee, and according to Emily, it was emotional but necessary. Sarah admitted that she had feelings for her, but promised she would respect our relationship and try to move on. Emily said that they both cried, but ultimately, they agreed to set some boundaries. No more unannounced visits, no more staying over at our place, and most importantly, Sarah needed to give us space to work on our relationship without her involvement. I wanted to believe that things would get better after that conversation, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. And, as it turns out, I was right. About 2 weeks later, I came home from work to find Emily sitting on the couch, staring at her phone with a look of shock on her face. What's going on? I asked, dropping my bag by the door. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she handed me her phone. It was open to a text message from Sarah. The message read, I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry, Emily, but I'm in love with you, and I don't think I can keep pretending that I'm okay with being just friends. I need some time away from you to figure things out. Please don't hate me. My heart sank. I knew this wasn't going to end easily, but I hadn't expected Sarah to cut Emily off completely. I looked over at Emily, who had tears in her eyes. She's gone, Emily whispered. She's not in my life anymore. The following days were hard for both of us. Emily was devastated. She had lost her best friend, someone she had known for years, and the void left behind was palpable. I did my best to support her, but there was also a part of me that felt relieved. Sarah had been a constant source of tension in our relationship, and now, without her interference, I thought maybe we could finally heal. But healing wasn't as simple as I'd hoped. Emily became distant. At first, I thought it was just grief over the loss of her friendship with Sarah, but as the days stretched into weeks, it became clear that something deeper was wrong. She was quieter, more withdrawn, and no matter how much I tried to be there for her, it felt like she was slipping further away. One night, we sat on the couch in silence, the TV flickering in the background, but neither of us was watching. I turned to her, unable to hold it in any longer. Emily, what's going on? You're not yourself. You barely talk to me anymore, and I feel like we're drifting apart. She didn't respond right away, just stared at her hands like she was trying to find the right words. After what felt like an eternity, she finally spoke. I don't know who I am anymore, she said, her voice barely a whisper. I thought losing Sarah would make things easier, but I miss her. I miss her so much, and I hate that I do. I hate that part of me feels like I made a mistake by cutting her off. I sat there, stunned, unsure of what to say. Are you saying you have feelings for her? Emily shook her head quickly. No, not like that. I love you, I swear. But I've realized that Sarah was such a huge part of my life, and now that she's gone, I don't know how to fill that space. It's not about romantic feelings, it's just loss, and I don't know how to handle it. I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. I had spent so much time worrying about Sarah's impact on our relationship that I hadn't fully considered the emotional toll it would take on Emily to lose her. And now, here we were, both struggling to navigate the aftermath. Emily, I said gently, reaching for her hand, I'm here for you, but we can't keep going like this. We need to figure out how to move forward, together. Otherwise, this will just keep pulling us apart. She looked at me, her eyes filled with uncertainty. I know. I don't know if I'm ready. I don't know if we're okay. Those words cut deep, but I couldn't ignore the truth in them. We weren't okay. We had been through too much in the past few months, and the cracks in our relationship had grown wider with each passing day. I realized then that as much as we loved each other, love might not be enough to fix everything. I think we need some space, I said softly, though the words felt like a punch to my gut. Not like a breakup, but just some time apart to figure things out. I need to know if we're really in this for the long haul, and you need time to process everything. Emily looked at me with tears in her eyes, but she nodded. Maybe you're right. Maybe we do need some space. We spent that night together, but it felt different, like we were saying goodbye to something, even if it was just temporary. The next morning, I packed a bag and left to stay with a friend. We agreed to check in after a few weeks to see where we stood. Those weeks apart were some of the hardest of my life. I missed Emily every day, but I also knew that we both needed time to think about what we wanted. I spent hours replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out where things had gone wrong and if there was a way to fix them. When we finally met up again, we sat in a small cafe, both of us nervous and unsure of what the other would say. Emily was the first to speak. I've done a lot of thinking, she said, her voice steady but soft. And I've realized that I've been holding on to the past too much. I've been holding on to Sarah, to old friendships, to old ideas of what our relationship should be. But I don't want to keep doing that. I love you, and I want to build something new with you, something just for us without the weight of all the things that have happened. I felt a wave of relief wash over me, but also a tinge of apprehension. I love you too, I said, but I need to know that we're both really ready for this. No more secrets, no more hiding things from each other. We have to be all in. Emily nodded. I'm all in. No more secrets. And in that moment, I knew we had a chance. It wouldn't be easy, and we'd have to rebuild trust. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like we could make it work. As we left the cafe, hand in hand, I realized that sometimes relationships aren't about finding a perfect path. They're about navigating the bumps together, even when it feels like everything is falling apart. And as long as we were willing to keep trying, there was hope for us.